Hello, my name is Alan Riley. This is Arcade Games as Public Art. Um, I am going to give you some background information about the organization that I am involved with called Arcade Commons, and our practice of producing new indie arcade games and sharing them with public audiences through events and exhibitions and festivals. And so I'm an artist. I made the game that you see here. It's called Video Freak. I should have a caption there, but there's a bit of information about this a little later on. Through my work with Arcade Commons, I also produce games made by other people, and that's sort of will become the focus of this talk. These are 4 games: Hair Gnaw, Fist Fillet, Waxwing, and Weather Sys Admin that were all produced by created by indie game devs, who I'll discuss, and they were funded and produced through open calls that were made available by Arcade Commons. So we funded and facilitated the creation of these projects. And I was involved with writing the open calls and sort of scoping out what these projects would eventually become through the creativity of their creators. Okay, so this is sort of a curatorial background about the creation of these projects. Okay, so I'm a PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz in the film department. And part of my research is about creating participatory video works that explore human connection. So arcade games and video games for me are part of a broader practice of media art and socially interactive technological art. So I'm very interested in how communication technology expresses social forms, and how changes in perception and the technologies of perception are involved with social transformation. So this is just a little bit of documentation of a live show that I created called Synchronization Station. And in this show, audience members would come up and learn this sort of fictional but functional communication technology where we learn to communicate non-verbally using our hands that are mixed through a video synthesizer in the way that you see there. That kind of socially interactive work comes out of my hands-on research with historic video tools like the Sandine image processor. And I'm very interested in the way that tools like this that involve live signal manipulation can be used to create environments. So this is just a little excerpt of a 3-channel video installation that is made using a video synthesizer. And I created this work in 2021 at a studio called the Institute for Electronic Arts that's in Alfred, New York. Another part of my practice is adapting media arts techniques and methodologies into hands-on learning experiences for young people. And I work with an organization called Beam Center, and we design project-based learning curriculum and learning experiences for young people. This is documentation of a project that I designed at the Asia Society Museum in 2014 for the Namjoon Paik exhibition, Becoming Robot. And so in this exhibition, or in this workshop for children, I did a brief gallery tour and showed the students documentation of Paik's video sculptures, these anthropomorphic video sculptures. And then we went into a studio space and built our own versions of this, like building these video sculptures on the floor using a combination of monitors and live cameras. So this is the kind of interactive media arts practice that informs my involvement with Arcade Commons. And the way that I first got involved with Arcade Commons is through this project, Video Freak, which I designed, and I created this project in collaboration with Mark Klebe, using cabinet designs that were based on an earlier project that was designed by a cabinet CNC model designed by Nick Santinello. And Mark had established this practice of building arcade cabinets in collaboration with artists, and he asked if I had a concept for a game, and I was very interested in taking some of these participatory workshops and media installations and sort of formalizing that into this familiar format of the arcade game. And so that led to the creation of this video synthesis arcade cabinet called Video Freak.
That's cool. You have both the characters on screen. Yeah.
So that's Video Freak, showing how I applied some of these socially interactive media arts workshops and video feedback and video synthesis techniques to the format of the arcade cabinet. And it kind of, for me, it became the template for how I understand curating and producing these projects, which arise through the collaboration between fabricators and artists and game developers. So, yeah, and so now, how did I want to do this? This kind of practice, kind of both the media arts practices that I'm drawing from here and the video game design practices all kind of have this history in the development of TV and television as an interactive medium in the first place. So in the 1960s, artists were beginning to work with television sets. And Namjoon Pig is a Korean video artist who created this work, Magnet TV, where he essentially gave the television set a controller. He stuck the magnet on the top of the television and made it into an interactive medium. For Pig, this kind of practice of sort of purposefully modifying or creatively misusing the television set to open up new pathways of interactivity was part of a broader kind of sculptural practice, sort of repurposing everyday objects and making the familiar unfamiliar. So this is his Clavier Integral from 1958, so this is a bit earlier, and this is a later performance that demonstrates sort of the alt control interface of this piano. So when Pig started to work with television sets a few years later, he was really performing a similar kind of artistic operation or artistic intervention in this everyday object of the television set, developing pieces, a series of pieces called Participation TV. So this is one version of Participation TV, and it's later, a kind of later installation of this, where you interact with the television through your voice with a microphone that's plugged into the yoke of the television set. So it's very interesting to compare these pieces with the earliest video games, which similarly modified or provided alternative interfaces to familiar everyday objects. Like Tennis for Two, also from 1958, in which William Higginbotham added an electronic interface to an oscilloscope that enabled a kind of early version of Pong. This is considered one of the earliest video games. Even, sorry, I'll turn that down a little bit. Excuse me. Another very early video game, Space War, which was written by Steve Russell in 1962 for the PDP-1 computer, was kind of developed in a similar context of coming up with creative alternate uses for this sort of laboratory computer equipment, creating a demo for a machine that was really intended for another purpose, but creatively extending its interactivity. So I'll show you the section with the game here. So and then you can sometimes play this game at the Computer Museum, Computer History Museum. So you can see this has a kind of a similar gameplay style as Asteroids in some ways. But it was a two-player competitive game, I believe.
Well, you start firing at the same time. Oh, you can fire towards the sun, and you start. Oh, I got that noise.
So artists also. This is sort of showing. I'm showing how some of the earliest video games that were made at all kind of come out of this media experimentation. Artists continued to experiment with commercially available games. And one of the earliest examples of glitch art by Jamie Faye Fenton is Digital TV Dinner. And this is from a 2024 performance of this work. So the way that this art piece, which is an artwork made with a video game console, is that you sort of rapidly start and stop the console while you're sort of unplugging the cartridge. And so you're kind of playing the console in a similar way as this prepared piano that Paige created to make these different glitch patterns.
Okay, hit the reset button and press the eject button right there. So you do this. That's done.
Artists also started using the kind of arcade cabinet interface, or the sort of the idiom of the arcade cabinet as an artistic format in the early 1980s. So this copper Gilroth piece was actually installed at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. So this is one of the earliest video game-like devices or artworks that was installed in a museum, or to my knowledge.
The center of the installation was an interactive symmetry drawing program. What we're going to show you in this 4-minute tape are first a series of finished drawings, and then we're going to step you through the actual drawing process. To do the drawing. This is what comes up first. Here I'm in front of the computer automatic mode, and I've already done a drawing so that you can get an idea of the scale of the kind of drawings you would use. You can see that little flashing box, that's your cursor that you move around with the joystick here. Position that, press the buttons to both draw and erase. You can see I have a flashing blue box in the inner corner of the eye where I just blanked out one little square. Final touch-up. When you finish the drawing, the computer erases it and scales it down. You can see it there in the upper left-hand corner. It's your original drawing. It then creates for you 7 symmetries off that drawing, including reflections and rotations.
The 80s, the electronic medium of video has taken its place right alongside abstract paintings and sculpture.
Okay. And Work It Out by Jane Veeder, which was presented at SIGGRAPH in 1982. Just a similar kind of image manipulation system.
ZGraphs! What we have here is Work It Out, which is my installation for the SIGGRAPH 82 art show. It's a video game, more or less, that allows a player to come up to it, get their face digitized, and then use real-time computer graphic processing to modify their image.
Boom.
With Work It Out, I'm using the universal appeal of your own face as a pretext to indulge in computer graphics more directly than you get to do with a commercial video game, where you're interacting with a finished product in restricted ways. Work It Out allowed me to place a number of real-time processing software tools that I had developed for myself within an interactive context, which was the way in which I most enjoyed playing with them, as compared to using them in a lockdown, speeded up mode, such as they appear in some of my videotapes. As soon as the player finds a digitized version of their face that they like, they proceed to select a color map from a cycling selection of 28. Then they proceed to the main menu, which has 8 modules for constructing your picture and 1 to exit. This particular module, the ripple module, redraws a swath between your 2 inputted points, and that swath is modulated by a sine wave.
This is really cool, but I'm going to just kind of move forward so you can see a little bit of how the image develops. It's pretty amazing, actually. 1982. Both of these projects, I think, were likely computers that were installed in the cabinets. I'm not sure what the hardware is. An early video game that was exhibited in a fine arts context, this is often credited as the first game exhibited at a museum, but the Copper-Gilroth piece is a bit earlier. But Mike Built a Shelter by Mike Smith and Duff Jacobson and Reza Keshavars in 1983, and was restored by the artist and curator Paul Slocum in 2014. I meant to include some slides about Paul Slocum has a very interesting gallery in Los Angeles, in Pasadena, called the And/Or Gallery, and he did a great retrospective of video games and art, or video games as art in 2018. The documentation is on his website. Yeah, Mike Built a Shelter is an interesting project. I haven't been able to interact with this game, but it kind of resembles Little Computer People, an early Amiga game that may have also been on Commodore 64. But in this game, I think you're building a bomb shelter, and the game was installed in a kind of shelter. Nuclear fallout shelter themed installation. So this is part of a broader art installation project. Commercial video games were first exhibited in a fine art setting by the Museum of the Moving Image in 1989 in the exhibit Hot Circuits. And so this is a chronological exhibition. They had Computer Space, which was an adaptation of Space War, the PDP game that I showed you earlier. And at the time of the exhibition, the most recent game that they had in this show was Narc. And one thing I found interesting, you're not going to be able to read this, but you could check it out. This is a New York Times article about this show. And they discuss how the curators actually had a really hard time tracking down all these arcade cabinets in the 1980s because people were just tossing them and replacing them with whatever the new game was. So there was no idea that these would be valuable, and they hadn't kind of resurfaced as a collectible or as a collection. So today we have this infrastructure that includes MAGFest and MAGWest to kind of have access to these games, and many venues around the country, including Wonderville in Brooklyn, where you can play new games and other sort of bars and venues where you can play older games as well. So there's a lot more of this history to cover, but just to mention that in the 2000s, there was sort of a resurgence of interest in artistic projects or artist projects that took the form of the arcade cabinet, like this project by Lovid and Douglas Repetto, which has a lot of similarities to the two pieces that I showed you from the early 80s, the Beater and Gilroth pieces. It's a drawing, sort of glitch art drawing game installed in a cabinet. And this was made by video artists. So you can see that there's this sort of abstract image manipulation going on in the game. And also, shortly after this, Baby Castles started operating and creating dozens and dozens of events where indie game devs would install their projects in a variety of compelling and beautiful forms. So there's a whole panel that could be devoted to Baby Castles. My connection to this kind of practice of making arcade cabinets as public art is connected with another organization called Arcade Commons. And so we've made over 25 arcade cabinets since 2013. These projects, as I mentioned earlier, often involve many people. There's a lot of documentation in these slides, and I won't be able to mention every name. But just to give you a sense here, this is Matt Fry working on Momo Pixel's Hairnaw in 2021, which is one of the projects I will discuss shortly. And then Tim Feit did the visual art for the Video Freak cabinet, my game. So in each of these projects, there are many collaborators who contribute to making it what it is. Okay. Part of the Arcade Commons practice is to create social spaces for indie arcade games. So we recognize that arcade games have a kind of a specific sociality to them. And this event is part of that practice, you know? There's a special social space, social gaming space created around the arcade cabinet. And we started out installing games in punk venues like Death by Audio and Silent Barn in Brooklyn. And the collection of games that we created grew into a sort of a traveling exhibition of many pop-up shows that we did in the 2010s, like this show at Elsewhere in 2018. Over the course of that journey, we had opportunities to organize exhibitions at the Smithsonian American Art Museum or components of public presentations of games, I should say. So Sam Arcade is an annual event that the Smithsonian organizes, and we had been invited on several occasions to curate a collection of games to present as part of that show. So this is an image of our setup from 2017 and 2019. The game in the foreground here is Circumnavigators by Juno Morrow and Andy Wallace. Arcade Commons has a long history with MAGFest. We used to be known as Death by Audio Arcade because that was the punk venue where the organization was founded by Mark Cleave. And the first time that Mark brought arcade cabinets to MAGFest was in 2015, and they were actually in the arcade section of Super MAGFest. And over the course of the years, Tronster, who was involved with MIVS, got really excited about our project and kind of devoted more an unofficial, non-MIVS, but kind of its own space in the MIVS section, Expo Hall. And eventually it became its own department, which now has a department head who's Socks, and I actually don't know if Socks is here at this MAGWest, but yeah, if you go to Super MAGFest, you can check out the incredible indie arcade section that now exists. Many of the games that are part of the Arcade Commons collection are first exhibited at a venue called Wonderville that's in Brooklyn, New York. So we were involved in the launch of Wonderville, which is a venue that was founded by Mark Cleave and Stephanie Gross, and recently Arcade Commons hosted the launch party for Nightmare Card. So this relationship continues. So the projects that I wanted to kind of focus in a little bit more on are these 4 games: Hairnaw by Momo Pixel, Fist Fillet that was created by Blake Andrews, Dustin Long, and August Lures, Waxwing by Common Opera, and Weather Sysadmin, which was produced internally by Arcade Commons, in a project led by Rudy Prieto. There's a lot of credits for that cabinet that I'm going to discuss briefly. So my role in these projects, I did not make any of those games or the cabinets. My role was to fund the projects and conceptualize the open calls that we published that solicited proposals from our community. So in 2021, the open call was for a hands-free video arcade cabinet. 22, it was the hybrid multiplayer arcade cabinet, so a game that that has an online and in-person component. We then did Playing with Light, the glowing arcade cabinet in 23, and Playable Climate, the weather station arcade cabinet in 24. And there's a current open call that's called Infinite Continues, Collective Achievement Arcade Game. All of these projects are made possible thanks to funding from the Brooklyn Arts Council. So the way that this works is that every year they have an open call for nonprofits to seek funding. And then I write an application where I describe how we will solicit proposals from our community based around one of these themes. And so then when we are awarded the funding from Brooklyn Arts Council, I can then circulate the open call for the project. So there's like a multi-step process here where the idea for doing a hands-free arcade cabinet exists, but there's no game. And then it eventually turns into an arcade cabinet because someone proposes something and then we help them make their project come to life. Okay? So kind of looping back to some of the themes that came up in that historical background, some of the things that go into the design of these open calls is to think about what is a way of making this kind of familiar format of the arcade cabinet unfamiliar in a new or surprising way. So like hands-free interactivity or using weather API data. These are some of the sources of those ideas. Is the interactive expressive? How? Like, will it create some kind of moment when people are playing the game? How does it create a social space? Is another way of phrasing that. And then what are the themes, playable models, poetry, histories, or social contexts that might be evoked by this idea? So I'm trying to think of a way of kind of setting a frame that isn't too restrictive, but gives someone a kind of concrete jumping off point for saying, like, you know what, like a game where you play with light, that sounds very interesting, that gives me this idea, you know? So it's like I'm trying to set the conditions for somebody to have a good idea, or for somebody who's already been thinking about it to say, yes, that's my project. So it's a delicate thing to try to meet somebody who you haven't talked to yet halfway, you know? So the hands-free arcade cabinet open call resulted in Hair Numb, which is a travel game about being a black woman who's tired of people touching her hair. So this game was a pre-existing game that was developed by Momo Pixel, and it was a browser-based game originally, I think. And she proposed making it into a hands-free game by using motion capture with a Kinect. So Dustin Long, who's a member of Arcade Commons, worked with Momo and her developer Tuxic, and he really prepared the game to be played in a hands-free way. So she became very deeply involved with Arcade Commons for the creation of this cabinet. This was an instance where when she part of what she got from this experience, in addition to having an arcade cabinet of her game, was like learning these practices of how to make your game arcade ready, so that if somebody walks away, it times out, and other kinds of things like this. So I'm going to play a short video that we produced about this project so you can hear the story from the creators.
I'm Global Pixel, and I'm the creator of Hair Now. The concept behind Hair Now was basically my lived experience. I wrote a script literally about somebody reaching to touch somebody they just met's hair. And I remember trying to explain it to like coworkers. And I remember seeing them act it out because they couldn't wrap their mind around it, right? Because it sounds preposterous. And I remember as I watched them trying to act it out, I was like, this would be so much better if it was a game. You know, my mind was just like, a game visually shows it and you could play it so you would understand. My number one was to create something for people who this had happened to relate to it, right? Like I wanted to create something that was kind of cathartic in a way. And then after that, I wanted to make something where it would teach, right? It's like, okay, for those who do it, you need to know this is not the way.
My name is Dustin Long. I'm a board member and the president of Death by Audio Arcade, and I helped to make the Hair Not arcade cabinet. Death by Audio Arcade is a 501c3 nonprofit, and it manages the indie arcade cabinets that mostly exist at Wonderville. Summer of 2020, we applied to a Brooklyn Arts Council grant with the idea of making a game themed after not using your hands, something that was following recommendations around hand washing and not spreading germs and things like that. The idea was, you know, we wanted to build something new, but with COVID, we didn't want anyone to touch anything. And so we decided to have an open call for submissions, and then based on what we got, we would build something based on that game.
I've always wanted to have an arcade cabinet. Like, that's what I grew up on. That's what first got me excited about video games. So I'm super excited with the end product. Working with Death by Audio Arcade was awesome. It was super educational. Like, I'm really into fabrication, even though sometimes I'm not that good at it. So it was really nice to be like surrounded by people who just can execute things so well and like so efficiently and fast.
Especially with the Brooklyn Arts Council grant and the open call that we did, we wanted to kind of offer the services and the knowledge that we've gained over the years to other developers in the community and kind of enable other people to make arcade cabinets for games that they envisioned. So it's kind of a democratization of that medium, and yeah, it's exciting to be a part of.
It's been really amazing to see Hair Now running at Wonderville. It's a really fun game to play, and it's unlike anything else that's here. And I think also, I see people connect with it. Like, they go and like grab their friends and pull them over, and they're like, you have to check this out. And I think it's really exciting to have a game with a message in the arcade.
People are learning that games can be fun and educational, right? That's why I'm proud of it, because everything that I wanted the game to do, it did.
Alright, so that was Hair Now by Momo Pixel, which was the 2021 open call project. And just to mention again that the organization, we recently changed our name from Death by Audio Arcade to Arcade Common. So that's why Dustin and Momo are discussing Death by Audio Arcade. In 2022, the open call was about making a hybrid cabinet. And because of the kind of unique interactivity of this concept where there would be an in-person and online or remote interaction with the cabinet, we decided to, for our open call, try to form a new partnership among the devs that applied and create something from scratch. And so the resulting project is Fist Fillet, which is a fishing, bullet hell fighting game that was created by Blake Andrews, Dustin Long, and August Lures. And the way that this game works is that there is a way to add fish, and you add fish to the pond, and then when you fight, if you successfully fight the fish, the cabinet prints out the fish that was created, and then it's no longer in the pond, and you have it on a piece of paper. And so Blake Andrews did the art template for the fish. And yeah, I already mentioned that this involved creating a new partnership between the game creators. And so each time that we've approached these projects, it's kind of worked a little bit differently. So there's this sort of iterative quality here. There's additional art in the games, handmade sort of stop motion art by Cy Lammer, including this boss fish and the player character, which is like pretty beautiful. In 23, the open call was playing with light, the glowing arcade cabinet, and this resulted in Waxwing, which is created by Common Opera. It's a two-person co-op light gun game. This open call was all based around the idea of coming up with a new use for the light gun interface that did not use a gun metaphor. You know, some of the earliest computer interfaces involved a light pen, so this kind of photocell or photosensitivity, light interactivity is a foundational part of human-computer interaction, so why should it always be a gun? You know, that was sort of the premise. And Common Opera proposed this game where you light candles, you light flames with a candle. So instead of it being a gun, you're holding a candle. So they fabricated these, this 3D printed candle enclosure for a light gun. Gus Bowling made the art for this game, the cabinet and worked on the cabinet fabrication. Lillian Ling made the music and level design, and Bet Saranko did programming and game design work. In this case, Common Opera is an existing studio, and they were an existing studio and they proposed a new game. So this is yet a new third model of how this can work. So they proposed this game in response to the open call, but they all knew each other and had an established practice of working together. And so then Mark Cleve provided technical support, and they also worked closely with Jacob Turetsky, who did the controller fabrication. So this was another instance of us kind of connecting different fabricators and game developers together. So just to show you a little bit of the gameplay for Waxwing. So one funny thing about this is that in the open call, I had said, like, this is about making a non-violent, non-gun based game, and it is not based on a gun, but it is based on blowing things up. So, but it's a beautiful project, and they made an extremely beautiful cabinet and fulfilled the premise of the glowing arcade cabinet with this LED installation. The 24 project was the weather station arcade cabinet. And for this project, what we did instead is Arcade Commons made the cabinet internally. And we have a studio in Brooklyn, and the studio members, Alex Pinate and Brody Prieto, created led the creation of this project, and worked with the fabricators Steve Folletti and Mark Lee to realize it. And what it ended up becoming, the premise was that we would produce the cabinet internally and then provide it as a multi-cab platform for devs. So Brody and Alex made this extremely elaborate launcher. The image on the left is the launcher for all the games, which are Cloud Gobblers by the Emma Technology Cooperative, Gravity Cylinder by Joe Burns, Whether or Not by Carpet Dime Studios, Tango by Coswag and Runpril, Turkey Extinction Accelerator Program by Kenji Jones, and Meteor Monsoon by Nick Centinello, who is Robisoft. And so you can see the cabinet being played here. So when you walk up to the cabinet, you see this sort of weather station metaphor interface that they created. And then each of the games that I mentioned somehow incorporates climate data. So it's a way of experiencing different playable models based on real climate data. For each of these projects, the way that we conclude the project and or I guess I should say launch the project, is by hosting a launch party event at Wonderville in Brooklyn. Wonderville has graciously volunteered to host each of these launch events. So you can see the posters for Hairna and Fistfillet, and the Waxwing and Weather Sysadmin launch posters. So this part of the practice is really important to creating culture around these new projects, having a moment where the creators connect with their community and they can see people interacting with their project. The projects have also gone on to have their own lives and journeys, and there's a series of exhibitions that have taken place at the Museum of the Moving Image that were curated by Regina Hersani and Barbara Miller in partnership with Wonderville, to present some of these projects to the public there as well. So Waxwing and Weather Sysadmin were both presented at MOMI. And Hairna also was included in the Sam Arcade a couple of years ago as well. So that game is also on its journey. That's the gist of it. And if you would like to get involved, you can join the Arcade Commons Discord, and this is a link to the open call that's currently open. We're accepting proposals until August 17th. So if you know folks who are interested in it. The new open call, the concept is Infinite Continues, the collective achievement arcade game. So the new concept is to have an arcade game that has a long duration. And instead of it setting up competitive play between multiple players over time, it's a continuous project that we all contribute to by playing. So I'm interested in ideas for games that keep transforming, or maybe it's a kind of emergent RPG, or maybe it's a game that brings back some of this visual art and sort of painting metaphor, but you're creating some kind of ongoing, continuing world or experience. So any of these things can be possible, because right now it's just this concept of collective achievement arcade cabinet. So I'm very excited and looking forward to seeing what folks propose. So there's, I think that there are a few minutes if anybody has any questions, or if you noticed anything that I might have missed, or anything that this makes you think about, I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you want your question to be included in the recording, you can use the microphone that is placed in the middle of the room. So any questions?
So certainly all of the Arcade Commons games seem to have screens. Is there an inclination to go towards games that are more analog at all, or is that not the skill set of the Arcade Commons team?
No, I see what you're saying. There are games that are made by folks in our communities that do not have screen-based interfaces, like circumnavigators is an example. So that's absolutely not a requirement that the game has a screen. Line Wobbler is not an Arcade Commons game, but it's another game that comes to mind that doesn't have a screen and uses an LED strip as an interface. This kind of experimentation with how you're providing feedback to the player is definitely something that I'm very interested in. So screens are not necessary. You know, screens might become a very vintage idea. You know, I don't know. We're gonna have to think about what is the next thing that we have to put a magnet on top of. And this is like screens going back to the early and mid 20th century. The cathode ray tube, Philo Farnsworth. So. Yeah, I mean, this idea of projecting light onto a piece of glass is in itself, the invention of the cathode ray tube is the result of some, kind of experimentation about interactivity. So we should think about other kinds of games.
Hey, I was wondering, so, I've seen a lot of great Arcade Commons games, and I'm not sure whether, all the games I've seen at, like, MAGFest are necessarily associated with the Arcade Commons. I'm curious if you have, like, any sort of, like, online archive where, someone who's curious about this kind of stuff could just, like, see all the games, like, side by side. And,
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, so this is a list of games that's on the Arcade Commons website. It's arcadecommons.org. And there are other projects that folks who are involved in the organization have worked on that aren't listed here, but this is kind of the collection of cabinets that as it's defined on the website. So you can see some of these projects that I just talked about, like Waxwing is up there, and my game Video Freak is there. And there is a pinball machine, A Place to Bury Strangers pinball. So it's a pinball machine that has fog effects. So I think there's a strobe light in there too. So there's other kinds of stimulation,
Is that at Wonderville?
Yes, it is.
So I've been to Wonderville. It's an amazing space. I'm curious, but it's also obviously relatively small. I'm curious, what is the life cycle of an arcade game? Are you able to find like homes for a lot of these games where they can be played, or do unfortunately like the older ones just end up in a warehouse for a while until you can find a place for them?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I don't have any pictures of the U-Haul situation in the slide deck here, but moving the games around is a big part of this whole project. Before Wonderville existed, the games were always bouncing around from place to place. They spent a lot of time in Mark's studio, and but the premise was always about the games being in public, finding a venue. So we've had games at places outside of Wonderville, like the NYC Resistor, the Nighthawk Cinema, All Night Skate had games for a while. These are all venues and locations in Brooklyn, so most of those games live somewhere in New York City. But yeah, I mean, once in a while something does break and then it has to go into the storage unit. So actually, right now, as I speak on this day, Video Freak needs some work. The video mixer finally, after about a decade, needs to be replaced. So I'm working on that with Mark. And but other games like Particle Maze, I had a slide here showing Particle Maze back in 2014. I think that's at Silent Barn. If I'm incorrect, it's at Death by Audio. But that game is still running. So the maintenance is part of it, and the intent is to keep most of these games alive so that they can continue to be played. That isn't true in every single case, but for the most part, we try to keep things alive and circulating.
Great, awesome.
Do developers have to be based in Brooklyn to submit calls?
That is a really important point that I should have mentioned. For the open calls, like, not every single person on the project team needs to be in Brooklyn, but we have to, the funding from the Brooklyn Arts Council for that specific thread of projects is tied to supporting Brooklyn-based artists. So something, actually a future goal, like if I had a slide that talked about what the next steps would be, is that I think we really are at the point now that we need to apply for some larger scoped funding that would enable us to solicit projects from people all over the country and internationally. Yeah, that's a next step for sure.
Has there been any work to have these as more like public art and like maybe outdoor pictures? I know that's weatherproofing would be a nightmare, but I think that'd be very interesting.
That is a really cool idea. Maybe that could be a future open call, the outdoor arcade cabinet. Now, I need to ask a question to you, which is, it's 10 o'clock. Was I supposed to stop talking 15 minutes ago? Or is...
I think this is till 10.
Okay, thank you so much. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to do a time check because I'm not sure if there's a
I
panel
don't
that's
think there was
going in.
anything else in the room
Okay,
for a while.
all right. Yeah,
The next panel doesn't start until 11, so I think even if you wanted
Okay.
to, yeah.
So, I mean, it is 10, so if but I welcome any additional questions.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.